Barney, you did not go home between the age of 8 and 13 because you were in a government and church-run residential school. What did you lose?
Well, it was actually 5 years, 5.5.
You're 5.5 years old.
Until I was 13, yeah. Well, I think what I lost was, of course, the teenage years that a normal child experiences. I didn't have that opportunity because I was a teenager when I went home, and I lived 2 miles from my home. It was just around the point, actually. Was on the west coast of Vancouver Island. So I didn't understand why we were made to stay there. Didn't speak English initially. Of course, I had to learn that pretty quick because that was part of the thing that you had to do. You were punished if you didn't speak English, and it was hard because we spoke I spoke my language, and it was difficult to move in that other direction. To move because I didn't understand a lot of the words that were being spoken to me. So.
Barney, did you see your parents in those 8 years from when you were 5 to 13 years old?
No, I didn't.
But you were only 2 miles away from home. What kind of fear, what kind of control was going on in your childhood that was possible?
Well, there was a lot of things that happened to me, right, very early into my experience in the school. I was, of course, one of the little boys that were abused by a pedophile, and so there was a lot of fear around that. There was a lot of fear because he would say, you know, you can't do this, or I'm going to kill you, or, you know, and then you kind of believe the guy, right? I mean, you're just a little child not knowing not understanding what's going on. Part of that, and part of, I'm not sure that I understand even today why I didn't go home. I think it was part of the taking the Indian out of us, or whatever they were trying to do, make us something that we weren't, right? Mm-hmm. We became.
Justice Murray Sinclair, I don't know how you have where do you even begin with that? That a family didn't go 2 miles away and get its child back.
We've heard many instances of schools that were located right in the middle of a community where children could see their families across the fence and weren't allowed to go and visit with them or see them. So the intent of the schools was to separate the children from the families. That's very clear. It's right in the beginning documents of behind the establishment of the residential school system, to separate children from their families, to reduce the influence of families upon the children, so that the transmission of culture, the transmission of identity, the sense of self that was different from how those in charge of the system saw Canadians would be lost to the children. And there was a Darwinistic belief that Aboriginal people were inferior, were savages, were something less than human, and that they needed to be saved from themselves by being placed into institutions where they would be civilized and indoctrinated into a different way of thinking through the process of Christianization. And as a result, the children who went to those schools lost complete contact with their families in many instances, and even those who didn't lose complete contact were damaged in their relationship with families, because if you can imagine what it's like as a child to be taken away from your community and from your family, and not to have your family come and rescue you from a situation that you don't want to be in, after a while you blame your family. After a while you begin to believe that those people who are in charge of your life on a daily basis so control you that you may as well give in to them. It's like the Stockholm Syndrome almost. And as a result, many of the young children who went through the school system came out of the school system with a damaged view of their identity, with a damaged view of their families, and went on in their own way to damage their own families. And so it's not hard to believe that it happened because it was intended to happen.
I guess I can understand why parents wouldn't go back and get their children.
Well, there's a great deal of evidence that parents, in fact, resisted, but the government did everything they could to stop them through the use of law. Laws were passed that said you couldn't leave the community to go to any place outside of the reserve unless you had a pass. There was a policy that was put in place that required that. And if you were outside of your community and you didn't have a legitimate pass from the Indian agent, then you would be arrested and detained and taken back to your community. There were also laws against protests, for example. You couldn't gather together. There were laws against gatherings of any significance, the potlatch and Sundance laws. All of those things were intended to prevent people from protesting. Aboriginal people were prevented from going to court. They couldn't hire a lawyer because there were laws against that. So it was through the use of law and through the use of government policy that parents were effectively prevented from protesting.
Shirley, what did you and your family lose in the residential school experience?
My family lost most of their children except for one. My oldest brother did not go to school because he had an eye disability. So they didn't take him because he had disability. But all my sisters all went, and brothers, they all went to residential school. Let me go back again. My mother went to residential school, but she lived right in Nukamakang where there was a residential school. And her family would just live down the road. And she used to see her family, and she couldn't get out of the fence to go and visit or to see her family. So she went for 2 years, and then they moved the school they built another school in Spanish Ontario, and that's where I went. That's where all my siblings went to school. They used to travel by boat, but I was looking at the boat. There's no lifesavers or anything, but by the time I came along, there was a highway that was built, and so we went by bus to the school. I lost actually my own family, the bond that is between my parents and my mother and father. I lost my own identity because for a long time I didn't know who I was. Because they were trying to make me somebody else. So when I came out, the first thing that I earned was $30. I went to the store and I bought white powder so I can powder my face so I can become a white person, that I would be accepted in the world.
What do you need from us for reconciliation?
Acceptance, respect, to be equal as a human being, because we're all human beings, to be treated as a human being, forgiveness, to restore some of the things that we lost, such as putting in programs for language, because a lot of our students, because we were forbidden to speak the language in the school system, so a lot of people lost how to speak their own languages. And I think the greatest thing that the government can do in the churches is to restore the language programs and the spirituality and the culture that they try to restore. And families coming together again to restore some of the things that they have lost.